So today is April 19th, 2015. My name is Heather Wolf.
I'm Jocelyn Gauthier.
And we are interviewing Alice Gauthier in Shepherd, Michigan.
Big town of Shepherd.
I know that you are not a military veteran, but you had an important job during World War II supporting the war effort. Can you tell us about your job?
Well, when I was 16, 17, my aunt in Royal Oak, they lived in Royal Oak. They worked in a bomber plant in Ypsilanti, and I went down there and took care of their two kids, Dick and Nancy. And then when I turned 18, I went to work at the Ford plant in Highland Park, Michigan, and worked there until the war was over. And I worked as a riveter, Rosie the Riveter. And I worked on the things that went inside of the wings of the plane. They call them bulkheads. They were, and we had stations, and we put them together. Then we'd rivet them, and that went in the wings of the plane.
What made you decide to do that, to become a riveter?
Pardon?
What made you decide to be a riveter?
Well, that's the job we went there for. I mean, that's the job that they gave me, or the girls. They had a department, riveter department, and that's where they put you.
So you were 18 when you started doing that?
Pardon?
You were 18 when you started being a riveter?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get that job?
How did I get it? Well, you put in for it, and they put you to work. They needed workers. Because there was no men. The women went to work. That's when the women started going to work.
What factory did you work in?
Ford Motor Company.
What shift did you work in? How many hours did you typically work a week?
I worked a day shift, 8 hours a day. And we got paid with a lot of $2 bills. Ford paid with $2 bills.
Where did you live while you worked as a riveter?
I worked with my aunt. I lived with my aunt and uncle. He got drafted into the Army too, so she was there with the two kids. So I worked one shift and she worked the other.
How did you learn about the opportunity to work at the Ford plant?
Well, that's all that was going around, that they needed workers at the Ford plant. And I just went and put in for it, and they hired me. That's, like I say, a lot of young girls went there to work. Some of them were married to Army men, but that's all that worked there was women, because there was no men. Well,
How long did you work as a riveter?
all the time I was there.
Do you remember what year you started?
No, I don't. You know, I wished I'd have kept a log. I wished I'd have really kept. Now I think back, I wished I'd have kept a log of all that stuff. But you don't think about it, or I didn't think about it.
Well, you said you were 18, so it was after Pearl Harbor
Right.
was bombed.
Right.
Do you remember? So you would have turned 18 in the February probably after Pearl Harbor was bombed? Is
Yeah,
that right?
probably.
Okay. And so, do you remember? I'm just trying to think. Do you remember if you went down, what part of the year you went down to live with your aunt?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I can't remember. The kids were quite little, but I can't remember.
So, what types of planes were you working on when you were riveting?
B-25s and B-29s.
And did you like your job?
Yes, I did. I really liked it. I guess that's why I liked factory work. Because after we moved up here and I worked at Farrell's all those years, I enjoyed my job. I liked what I did.
Did you start to make more money as a riveter the longer that you worked there?
No, you made the same. No.
What did it feel like to be able as a woman to help and have your own paycheck during the war?
It was nice to have your own paycheck. It was could go and buy some things that you didn't have before. You know, clothes. You could buy what shoes. When the war was on, though, you had to have you'd have to have for shoes, and for hose, you'd have to have a card, or and then you'd stand in line a long time for that if you wanted to get some. They were rationed like sugar was, because sugar was rationed.
What were other things that were commonly rationed during that time?
I really don't know.
What did you do with the money that you were making?
What did I do with it? I saved some of it. I bought my folks a refrigerator, and I bought drapes for their house. Sent money home for kids to buy kids' clothes. That's what I did.
So you helped support your family back here in Shepherd with your paycheck too?
Right.
Wow.
Oh, go ahead.
Was that the first refrigerator your parents had?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
I think back, how did we keep our food? I can't, because we had milk and all that kind of stuff. We made our own butter and everything. And how did we keep that cold? Nowadays, if you don't stick everything right in the refrigerator, then I can't remember if we had an ice box or not. I don't know where we get the ice.
Mm-hmm. And you told, okay.
Did you ever buy war bonds with the money that you were making?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I bought bonds.
Were those hard to purchase, or how did you
They
get war
take it out of
bonds?
your paycheck.
Oh. They took it right out of your paycheck from Ford?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. So they made it really easy for you to purchase the bonds?
Well, yeah, you'd have to sign up for it. So much, like if you wanted to give $1 or $2, then when you had $8.75, that's what the bond was then. The cheapest one was $8.75, I think it was.
So
And then it would mature at 25.
So how much of the money did you put into bonds?
I couldn't tell you that because I don't know.
And then how long did you hold on to your bonds before you cashed them in? Did you wait till after the war, or?
Yeah, after the war.
How did you feel about your role in helping our country during the war?
I felt good that I was working, making the plane, working on the planes. I enjoyed that. I always enjoyed working anyway, I guess, no matter what kind of work I've done.
Well, you still do, even to this day.
I'm not as good anymore, I'll tell you. I don't think I haven't.
And I know it bugs you that you can't do more.
Right.
Yeah, and we just celebrated, what birthday was that?
91.
91. Interesting.
Did rationing significantly affect you during the war at all?
Did what?
Did rationing significantly affect your life at all during the war?
Well, they had gas rationing, and they had sugar rationing, and then hose, what do you call them, nylons. Nylons, if you want a pair of nylons, you'd have to stand in line a long time. Because, in the same way with shoes. You could only buy 1 or 2 pair of shoes, that was it. Because they were rationed too.
And then when you were going to buy things that were rationed, what did you have to do in order to purchase those?
You'd have to go, God, I can't even remember where you had to go to get the card saying that you was limited that many, or in your sugar.
And then you had to show it to the person when you were going to buy it?
When you buy the stuff, yep. And then they'd punch your card.
What happened after the war ended? Did you get to keep your job at the factory?
Nope, you were gone.
So
Then I went to work at a donut shop in Royal Oak.
were you upset that you lost your job?
Yeah, I liked my job.
So why did you lose your job?
because the war was over.
Did the men who had the jobs before want their jobs back? Is that what happened, do you think?
Well, they didn't make the planes anymore, so there wouldn't be no jobs.
After the war, did you continue to work outside the home?
Did I do what?
You continued to work outside the home in factories? You continued
Yeah,
work?
I worked in a donut shop in Royal Oak until we got married, and I quit.
So how did you end up back here in mid-Michigan?
Because the boys had a milk routes where you went and picked up the milk at all the farmers. They thought he might like doing that, so we bought a route, and he hauled milk for a couple of years. And then he put in an application at Dow, and then he went to Dow to work.
So do you think your work as a riveter and your experience during World War II in the factory helped you get the job that you worked in Mount Pleasant?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think so. I don't know, but I'm guessing.
And how long did you work at the factory in Mount Pleasant?
By about 27 years.
Is that where you retired from?
I didn't retire. They moved out.
Oh. So,
1983. August of 1983.
they just closed up the factory?
They did, yep. Everybody kept saying they were going to move, but we didn't believe them. And then we were on inventory, where they took inventory of all the stuff. And I got a call one day from the girl that I worked with a lot. She said, "Did you know they was moving the presses out from Mount Pleasant?" And I said, "No, I hadn't heard it."
Wow.
And so that's what they done. They moved the presses out to Tennessee. That was it. And I never got another job after 83. I stayed home.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us about your time in the factory, or what it was like during the war, or anything you can think of?
Not that I can think of, but I just enjoyed my work. I really missed it when they told us we were done. I mean, I had a lot of things around the house you could do. You get caught up, then you ain't got nothing to do.
Right. Well, we learned a lot about the difference that your generation made for our country in class. And we learned about, women like yourself and how many women got a sense of independence, being able to make their own paycheck and work in the factories. And I think you told us that.
Right.
The things that you told us today.
But then nowadays, a lot more women are more executive type people and stuff like that. They're getting, but women don't make the money men do yet. I heard that on the news the other day. They told how much less the women make for the same job that the men do, but they don't get paid for it.
And
so that's still a problem.
do you know, was that the case when you worked as a riveter? Do you know if you got paid less than the men?
Well, I imagine the men made more than we did.
Yeah.
Because they were trained, like, when you're a mechanic or something like that, you've got to learn that trade. They would have to learn that trade to set all this stuff up and how to fix it when it broke down. Yeah.
It's interesting.
But I enjoyed my work. I did. I really did. It was different than housekeeping and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, your generation sure made a difference in our country. That's for sure. And it's always so neat. My students will always love to learn about, I tell them about you whenever we learn about Rosie the Riveters. And I always give examples about you. And they sure love to learn about it. So.
Yeah, it was something, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really, I've read a lot in the history books. That was a really hard time for our nation. Yeah. And, without people like you and Grandpa going over to serve and fight for the freedoms, I mean, that's just so important. So.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
How about you, Jazzy?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I feel like I really learned a lot.